All right, so thank you everyone for being here. My name is James Coburn. I am more than anything else a data enthusiast. I'm a racer. I race Formula Ford in the UK right now. I did race BMWs when I lived in the US, and so switching to open wheel has been a fantastic transition. What I wanted to do today was just talk to you all a little bit on behalf of AIM and AIM Technologies, a little bit more about Race Studio 3 analysis. And so we'll get into some introductions in just a minute. But before we do, I want to address some housekeeping. Now, this version of Zoom is one where we're all able to chat together, which is lovely in a way, but it also means that somebody might have special guests coming in, or they might have phones going off or second calls. So my only ask to everyone more than anything else is please just put yourself on mute, which would be lovely. If you want to ask questions when we set that up, come off mute, that's fab. But just so that we don't have interruptions, we are recording this as well, and an edited version will be put on YouTube at a later date so that you can go back and hopefully follow along as to what we're doing. And so, yeah, our goal today is to be able to sort of just give you a quick glimpse into sort of like the second edition of our monthly conversation about Race Studio 3 analysis. And to be able to do that and to make sure that we've got, the absolute best representation, we've got James from AIM Technologies on, and we also have Emiliano from AIM in Italy, who is the designer of this software. And so if there are questions and things that come up that I can't answer, which is highly likely because I'm still figuring it out myself, then Emiliano is online to be able to help answer questions. Now, one of the other things, you'll probably see me looking over here, I have two screens and camera's just here. So if that's the case, I'm just seeing if there's any questions. The other thing I'd also say is let's keep the chat box running as we go, because that's where we can answer questions on the fly as we go. And Emiliano especially, I'm sure, can answer some of the questions, as can James, and anyone else who wants to help each other out, which would be good. So without further ado, let's get cracking. And what we're going to focus on today is we're going to cover these. Now, it's going to be a live tutorial session. Now, this means that we may, with a beta software, have some moments when things don't go according to plan, but that's the beauty of this being a beta. It allows us to be able to really work through some of these areas with Emiliano on. He can see, he can hear, and experience some of the sort of the conversations we're having. But the goal of having this in beta that everyone can use is so that we can all pressure test the software to be able to get it to the point where it's ready for production. But it also comes with a caveat, as we all know with any kind of beta software, that there's also the occasional moment when we might find ourselves with, it's not a Mac, it's a PC, so I'd say spinning wheel of death, but I think that whatever we call now that blue circle that hovers over Windows 10 or whatever we're using. So that's just one of the sort of the things I wanted to be able to set up. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to do a quick recap of webinar number 1. Now, this will be available. We had a bit of a changing of the guard, so to speak, a little bit, and so it didn't go up after the last seminar. No issues. Hopefully, you'll be able to watch episodes 1 and 2 of our thrilling installments back to back, if you so to choose, once we've sort of uploaded that. And so we'll just do a quick recap for those who may not have been with us for webinar number 1. But the next thing we're going to start having a look at is going to be user profiles, because this, I personally believe, is the most important part of the software, because one of the things that I've experienced after the last 10 years of working with the previous or current version Race Studio 2 analysis is that no two people analyze the data the same way. We might have different learning styles, we might have different sort of applications of how we use the data, we have different vehicles, and so being able to customize the view for your own type of setup is super important. So we're going to have a look at user profiles and how to set that up. The next thing we're also going to have a look at is the channels report. Now, each time we meet once a month, we'll bring in a new feature. Next month, we might bring in, for example, the scatter graph or the XY plot. But I wanted to bring in, each time we meet, one of the extra sort of views that you will have as you start to work with your user profiles. In fact, I'll probably cover off on channel reports before we start anything. And then the one that seems to get a lot of questions and a lot of requests is the split times analysis report, which slowly over time became and is one of my absolute favorite reports that I use. It shows me the lap time I could have done should I have been more consistent and better as a racer. But it's something that's particularly useful there as well. So these are the things we're going to cover, so to speak. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stop sharing my PowerPoint presentation like this. And I'm going to switch over to Race Studio 3 analysis. So James, quick thumbs up. You seeing Race Studio 3 analysis? Thanks, mate. Perfect. So this is where we are. Now, what I wanted to do before we get going is that there may be some of you who are like, well, I missed episode 1. And this is new to me. It looks like Race Studio 3, but there's some new bits and bobs that are on here that we want to be able to address. So let's just talk through a couple of those quickly, because I think it's going to be useful for the purposes of our presentation. The first is when we load the Race Studio 3 analysis, I actually clicked on the big thing that you're going to be clicking on. But before we get there, you're going to notice there's this thing here. It says James, that's me. This is my profile. And if I click on this, this is my account on the AIM website. To be able to use the Race Studio 3 beta software, you have to have an account with AIM. Now, I'm sure in the future, as we go through, this is going to be useful because certain elements of the software will allow us to be able to upload information and then download it on different machines. And so to put that into context, if any of you have, for example, created user profiles on one computer and then looked at analysis of data on another computer and thought, oh, I left those user profiles on the other computer. This might be an area where those can be shared. But more than anything else, to start off with, the reason to have this account is so that you can click on this button here, which is send feedback to AIM. And if you do so, you can say anything. I actually sent one in just this morning when I was preparing for today's webinar, which I'll show you later on what I actually sent in. But you just drop in your details and notes and it goes through to Emiliano and his team and they are able to see. And this is where we talk about this being beta. This is sort of like you get early preview, but help AIM make this a better software over time, which I think is a really nice way of being able to have that more interactive type of scenario going forward, which is good. So that's the first thing, and I think that's important that you focus there. The next thing I want to be able to show is it will be this button here that we will click on in just a minute. This is where we will take you to the Race Studio 3 analysis. Now, many of you who've got more modern day AIM devices, whether you've got an AIM Solo 2, which is probably one of the most popular, AIM Solo 2 DL, I know this because I have a website or a YouTube channel, I should say. Many of you may have heard my delightful voice before explaining these. I actually got cracklier and older over the time of doing these videos for about 10 years. But one of the things is that you downloaded your software, downloaded your data in a software, Race Studio 3, and then you'd hop over and analyze it in a different program, which was Race Studio 2 analysis. And I know that, things like AIM Solos and Solo 2 DLs are quite popular because, they're the videos that people like to consume the most. And so some of the features that we talked through last week, and I'll show some of those as we go through it, we'll focus on that as well. But the beauty of this is that it will be all baked into the same software. Your configurations, your analysis, your data download, everything that you're going to do with the software component of your AIM device or your AIM setup will be done in the same software, which is going to be and is a lovely feature. So I'm going to click here and it's going to take you through to the new test database. This is probably one of my favorite parts of the new software because it's so much nicer to be able to sort through and work through all your channels. If you want more details as to how to set this up, what tests to be able to look at, what kind of data to be able to view, webinar number 1 is going to help you. If not, there are helpful YouTube videos on the web. I've done a few, so if you want to visit my my YouTube channel, just look for my name, James Colborn, on YouTube, you'll find them, but they're also available on many other sites as well. So this is the view. You've got your events on the left-hand side. This was the date. These are how many sessions you ran. You can see that this one, for example, was anyone who knows Formula Ford knows that we've got an event called the Walter Hayes Trophy, and it's where 100+ cars all enter, and it's a 4-day vigil, which is absolutely fantastic. So I have 20 or so sessions there. So instead of having a mass list of sessions and files, I just have them nicely, neatly sort of compacted here. And I can see as I click in any of these certain pieces of information about the session. Now, there are a few other things that we want to be able to just recap from the first time we met and talked about this. The first was that if you've got a SmartyCam file, it will look like this. If you've got a data file, it will look like this. And if you're lucky enough to have data and video from the same session, it will look like this. And you'll have a combined instance of that data being held together, which is absolutely fantastic, which means that you can analyze data and video together. And so this was the first thing we talked about in the last seminar. Nice way of being able to navigate through the data. The next things that we had a look at is that we had a quick and brief glimpse at some of the session files themselves, and we went into some of the detail. So, for example, if I actually double click on here, and this is from Stephen, who works and MD of AIM Technologies here in the UK, you can see his racing, which it's funny, when I show these in the US, I usually have somebody else, and it's like having your homework critiqued in front of an entire audience. And so we probably won't do that today. But when we double clicked into that file, if you have a SmartyCam file and a data file together, you also have the opportunity of being able to sort the data. And if I click on play there, you can see as the car moves, it traces through the data and it works through. So this was probably one of the most sort of popular features that we talked about, but there are other things, just in case you don't happen to have a SmartyCam, which you should, but just in case you don't, that we wanted to be able to have a look through as well. So what we did was we also said, let's close that one down. Let's just open up a simple data file. Remember, this is a recap. This is not how fast I'll go through everything else. This is just making sure we're all on the same page. That some of the features that we looked at, that if I opened up a data file, and this is what you may get if you don't have a SmartyCam, you still have a lot of nice features to be able to see. You've got your channels, but you've also got these other great areas. And this is what I encourage you to start clicking around and seeing. The second or third most popular video that I've ever produced, and has been since I produced it for the last 5 years, has been how to overlay your laps from an AIM solo all the way through to any of the loggers or dashes on things like Google Earth. Well, the beauty of it is now this is all done for you. So the moment you open up your file, you are now able to look at a track map. It doesn't matter what kind of setup you have from AIM, and you can see your lines as they relate to something like Google Earth. But the beauty is if you don't quite like that overlay and you happen to be a Microsoft fan or a Google fan, you can use Bing, for example, or any other variables that are there. So these were all the things that we chatted through last time around, and it's something that I encourage you to have a look through. What we're going to talk about today is evolving this conversation to the next level, because one of the things that I personally like is that I like to have my own customized, like to be able to see things in a way that I want to be able to see them. So that's what we're going to talk about, and we're going to dig into not only the measures graph and the time distance, as it's called here, which we looked at, and the track map that we're looking at here. We might even weave in a little bit of data, but what we're going to have a look at today is being able to customize this view for ourselves in terms of what we want to be able to see. So let's get cracking. And I know there's questions coming up in the chat box. Hopefully folks are able to sort of chalk amongst yourselves. Emiliano, I'm sure, can answer some of the questions, as James can as well. But what we're going to do is we are now going to start looking at some of the other features. Now, the best way to think about a user profile is, what do you want to be able to see on the page you're looking at? And do you want multiple pages of looking at different things? This is the default view that came up with. This is just an analysis file from a session that I did at Castle Combe in Wiltshire. It's my regular racetrack, strange to say, a guy who lives in London, but I just love the guys and I love the competitive nature. And I think Castle Combe's a wonderful track. And so I'm running the championship this year, so I've got a lot of data from there, and I want to be able to see certain different pieces of information. Maybe on one view, I want to be able to see information associated with the driver. Maybe on a different view, I want to be able to see information associated with the car. Maybe I want a graph view. Maybe I want it all together. And that's what we're going to focus on a little bit today. So before we do that, the best way to think about what you can customize here is to know what these little buttons are here, because these will correlate to what kind of view and what kind of window you can have as part of your view overall. And so just to confirm what we've got time distance, which if you click on it, the default will be something very similar to what we've seen before. It's a measures view. If you click on this track button, you'll get a track view. We'll just open these up just so you know. If you click on the scatter report, you'll get a scatter graph, which we'll probably cover off on next time, because this one we can dig into a little bit more detail, because it may take a little bit more time to configure. If I clicked on histogram, again, another report we may look at later on, but it's just another graphical view of the data. Similarly, these are the ones we may focus on a little bit more today. And if I hover over it, you see that we've got split times report. We're going to dig into that later on in the session. This is one that people absolutely love. I do, and it's one that gets used a lot. I just happened to be not racing this past weekend, and sure enough, the phone goes and says, how do I create the track map for the split times report? And so happy to help no matter what, but it's one of those things that people want to be able to use. And then similarly, the other one we're going to focus on today is going to be channels report. Now, these two that are separate elsewhere, these aren't part of the configurable view we're looking at, so we're going to ignore these for now. We'll cover off on those later on, but for the purposes of today's demonstration, they don't necessarily make any difference at all. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop and I'm going to hover here on the channels report, because I want to be able to walk through this feature because it's got a few cool new aspects of this. Now, before we went into lockdown, which feels like an eternity ago, which it kind of was, I barely ever used the channels report. Now, I've been using this software for ages, and I never really dug into the value that the channels report was producing. And slowly over time, AIM Sports in the US were doing webinars, and they were doing them twice a week. And so for an hour, twice a week, you'd be able to listen to people like me sort of talk about their experiences with the software. And this is where I start talking about that customized user type of view, that somebody was really, active in terms of using the channels report. So I said, okay, well, I'll give it a whirl and have a look at what we use it for. Now, for me personally, I use it more than anything else for aspects of vehicle health. I use this to be able to understand how I was doing across the lap. And as my car is 33 years old, I like to look at certain variables that, may be indicative of, a car that, really needs looked at. But these apply to any car, I might add. I like to look at things like oil pressure. I like to look at engine temperature. I like to look at battery, because you can't charge up a Formula 4 battery while it's running. You have to charge it up and hope you've got enough charge for the race. And just really be able to understand those. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to configure that a little bit now to show you how it works. And I'm going to show how we can weave that in to a user profile as we go forward. So right now I've got this up here, pressure. That's just a default that was there. So the big button that you want to be able to focus on to add details into this channel report, which will tell you information per lap, is this add remove. So these are open. I don't want them. So I'm just going to click on them, and it's going to get rid of them, which is done. And so this is effectively a default view, which is an empty channels report. Now, I want this channels report to contain information which is going to be useful for me. So again, this is going to be up to you, depending on what kind of car, what kind of data, what kind of logger you've got. But depending on what kind of channels you have coming into your system, you can set something up. So I want to set this up for vehicle health. So I'm in the channels report here. I'm going to click on add remove. And as soon as I click there, I can click on add. And as I look in this box here, this is where some of the new things, I'm not quite sure what new whisper means. I don't know if I'm supposed to whisper as I'm talking about this. It may be just a temporary word that is there, but effectively this is going to help me choose which types of channel I want to be able to view by lap. Now, one of the things that I'm fascinated with, there's no rev limiter on a Formula Ford 1600 engine. It's basically user don't over rev it. And so most important to me is to be able to look at something like RPM. So I can click on RPM here, and I want to be able to see the maximum RPM. So if I click here and then here, and I click on OK, it will bring in the RPMs. Now, interestingly here, this is where I should start talking to myself that might be a little bit generous with the accelerator at that particular point. So I need to address that. So again, this is thinking about vehicle health. If I click on add remove, there's some other things that I want to be able to see as well. So I'm going to click on add again. And the next thing I want to be able to see is oil pressure. And I want to be able to see what the minimum oil pressure was, because obviously we don't want the oil pressure to drop below a certain threshold. Those look okay, and that's on the in-lap, and so not too worried about that. The engine probably wasn't revving at that point, but we can confirm it. Then I want to see how hot the engine was. And so I can go in here and I say, okay, well, I want to see max on this one. And I can go in and I can click on all of these and see certain key variables that are there. Then the last thing I want to be able to see is that I also want to be able to add battery. And again, I'm not going to add all of these, could make for the most boring presentation, but I'm struggling to find it. So what I can also do here is I can search, it's actually right here. But if I want to search for any of my channels, I can always use the search box, but I'm going to click on external voltage. And the reason I want to be able to click on this is I want the average, because the average is going to tell me what it is per lap. I don't want to see the spiking range. I just want to see what the average is. So I can click on that, and that's going to show me the average. And so now I have my channels report that is showing me information for that session associated with the vehicle health. You can see, for example, the battery slowly starting to decharge itself. You can see the oil pressure actually starts to sort of lessen over time. That makes sense as the engine gets hot, as the oil might get a bit thinner. We can also see what happened with the water temperature. And so, yep, water temperature starts to increase quite a lot. All of these are useful because I want to be able to start identifying certain key variables that I want to look at. There's only one thing on this chart as I'm looking at vehicle health, which I'm sure you can all look at and go, yep, you really need to pay attention to that, is that I don't want to have over revs this big. And so that's something that I need to work on. And if I were configuring how, to give you an example of how my brain works, I need to be told. Because the one thing I have is that when I'm racing, I'm rather concentrating on where I am not being passed and who I'm chasing, rather than necessarily thinking, was that 7,100 or 7,000? And so as a result, what I'll do is I'll probably change the shift light alarms on my vehicle to bring it down. So I'll have a flashing light that says shift and don't over rev your engine. So all of these are useful for me to be able to see. And so we set that up. Now you may be wondering, well, what's all this stuff on the right-hand side? And this is a new feature with the channels report, which I actually think is a really nice addition to what's happening because it graphically demonstrates the information that you have in the channels report. And so right now, we can see we've got lap number across the bottom and we've got lap time. And you can see that, you know, started out really, I wonder what happened there. Might have had a moment on track, who knows? It's about a second slower, but also the one thing is this is a qualifying session, so chances are I was cooling down my tires, which is whether it's necessary or not, I don't know. If I want to change that and I want to see different types of information, I can click on either of these two parts of the graph to visualize this data better. So if I wanted to see on which lap was my maximum RPM, I can see now you know, that, you know, I was getting over eager and then maybe I started to correct the issue that was being there. I can start seeing this data graphically and start looking at it. It's a nice feature that allows you to use it. If, however, you don't want it, you can always click in this little, I was just about to say wrench, but now I'm in the UK, I can say the word spanner, which is nice. And I can turn on and off that if I need to. So I can click here and click on OK, and it'll take it away and we'll see a traditional channels report view. So that's the channels report feature. Something that half of you, quarter of you might be like, yeah, I use that all the time. This seems pretty straightforward. This bit was boring. Other of you might have thought, yep, this is something that I've not really used before. But I think it's a really useful feature, especially as you start to visualize it. But the reason I wanted to set that up is I want to start talking about user profiles and how to be able to bring in certain variables. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the time distance. You're probably thinking just as well, we're recording this so I can watch it back again, maybe in half speed. If I am going to quickly just yell and I will slow down, but I wanted to make sure that we cover off on some useful content today. Now, this is the time distance view. And interestingly, this is the default that I get with the data that comes in from my data logger. I get speed, I get RPMs, I get what they call the storyboard down here, which I've never used ever. I also get a graph, which is lovely. Sorry, a track map, which is nice. And I also get a lot of these colors across the top. Now, any of you who are familiar with creating a track map will know that these colors represent segments. And we're going to talk about those later on as we get through that, because that'll help us with things like the split times report. But this is the default view that I get. If you're using an AIM solo data, you may just have on here GPS-based information as well. But basically, these are the channels that we want. But I want to customize this. I want to make this specific to me and something that I want to be able to see. And so first and foremost, the one thing you may have heard me remember first, I said first of all, is that there's something down here that I don't use. Now, the storyboard is brilliant in some instances, and we'll talk about this in future webinars because I know a lot of people do use this, but for me, it's not something that I do use. And so it's a sort of small glimpse into each of the laps. And so I'm going to start customizing my view. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, and all of a sudden this window pops up. And just to confirm what I'm doing, I'm going to click on that again. I'm going to right click anywhere in this sort of area that I want, and I'm going to click on remove window. And now I'm starting to customize my view. I've got rid of that particular window, and now I'm actually seeing just the time distance. Now, if you're someone like me, you might want just a simple view. One of the things that I love on the time distance report is I just want to see the time distance report. I don't want any extras. I've only got a 13-inch laptop when I'm at the track. You can probably tell by my glasses, my eyesight's not as good as it used to be. And so as a result, I want to be in a position where I've got a lot of screen real estate to be able to work on. So now I've got this view, and the next thing I want to be able to say is I want to be able to see the channels which really mean something to me. And so, yes, I do want to have speed and RPMs. But for me, the way I analyze data, and we'll probably cover off on these on later seminars and webinars that we do, is that I like to be able to see certain pieces of information. I like to see what the driver's doing. I like to see what impact it's having in terms of my performance, in terms of lap time. And I want to see some information that may help me associate aspects of what the car's doing. So I like to be able to see RPM because that'll help me understand what gear I might have been in or something along those lines. So I'm going to leave RPMs and speed, and you can see those two are both selected here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add brake pressure. I've got options actually. I have brake pressure front and back. That's how I can work on brake bias. And so, you know, that's something we've got so many things we can cover on these webinars, but I'm just going to click the front brakes because this will give me an indication of what my brake application is like, which I wish I hadn't turned that on because it's pretty dreadful. It's the opposite of threshold braking. It's opposite threshold braking. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. We will scroll down and I'll say I want brake. I also want to see throttle. So I have a throttle position indicator that shows me when I'm full throttle and when I'm not. Which is here. And to be honest, that's basically all I want to be able to see. I might want to have a few other things that are on here. I might have calculated gear, but you know, this helps me get a really good idea of what I want to be able to see. And then the last thing I've got on here is I've actually got a track map, which is here. I kind of like that, so I'm going to leave it. I can make it a bit bigger if I want to, but I've also got the track map. And so every time I move somewhere on the time distance, it'll show me where I am on the track. And so this is useful. There's one other thing. If I go to laps, I also want to be able to add in a reference. This is the reference lap, but I want to add in a comparison lap. And I'll show you why in just a second. So if I say, for example, I want to be able to pick, it's funny when you do this and you plan this in the webinar and you do everything and then you like just, well, you know, you slow down trying to choose something. I'll just click on this one here. Now what I've got is the last piece of information that I've got. Now, if you've got an AIM solo, you can still see half of this information. You can see your GPS speed, you can see your longitudinal data. And the new thing that's added on this graph now is this time distance that's here. Now, this will tell me, as we're all probably familiar with, that the green is the reference lap and the, let's say that sort of reddy burgundy color is the slightly slower lap. And you can see why. And then I can just start going in and starting to analyze data, such as, you know, why was I started to drop speed here? Well, you can see I was better on the throttle on the green lap than I was on the red lap. And you can see that allowed me to carry a little bit more speed. This is what I would start to look at and go, okay, well, that's really good. I can also see that I scared myself a little bit and broke a little bit too hard on the green lap as well. So there's a lot of things that I can see here as I go through this data, but this is the custom view that I want to see every time I load up a data file. Now, if I turn this off right now and I went back, I would see the default view again. I wouldn't have been able to save my own profile. So what I want to do is I want to save this as a user profile. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this little gear icon here, and I'm going to click on this and save profile as. And I can say this is for the AIM webinar. Whoopsie. Did I spell that right? Yep, which is good. AIM webinar, it's a test that is there that we're doing, and I can click on OK. Now that is custom view I will get when I turn this on. Even if I go back to the default view, I'll be able to load this. So if I click on here, I can click on load profile. The profile is already loaded. So let's do this. Let's turn this off. Let's go to a different data file. Typically, I will see a default. So we're going back to that default view. Remember all that effort I just made to be able to change that. And so what I want to do is I want to click on here and I want to load a profile. And in here, I should see that AIM webinar test. If I click on that, it's gone back to that channels report that I made. I've got the time distance, and all of a sudden I've got all that information that I just set up. So now you've got that. Now, one of the things you may want to do here as well is you may want to be in a position where you're going to say, well, I want to add some more data to this particular screen. I don't need so much screen real estate. I want to add some more to this. And so what I can do is I can right click in the middle of this. I can click anywhere you like, actually, if you're in these boxes. And I can click on Add Window. And I can say I want it on the right, I want it on the top, I want it on the bottom. So I'm going to say I want it on the bottom. So I'm going to click there. Now, remember earlier when I said it's really important that you remember what these are. Now, the reason I said that is if you choose a screen that you're going to add here, these correlate to these in terms of options. And so as a result, if you happen to have in this case, a channels report you've just set up, if I click there and I click on OK, what's going to happen is that channels report that I just set up that's going to show me all of the information that I've just been creating, such as the RPMs, my voltage and everything that's there, that's now showing up, which is lovely. So I've now got that functionality that is there. Now, I probably don't want this graph here because I've got these here. So I can also customize that view here. So if I go here, I'd like on this page to be able to, work through the channels report, hide that statistics plot that is here. I can do that now. Now I've got this view that I can see here. I think, okay, well, that channels report's a bit big. So let's just move that down a little bit and resize it like that. And I can drag it and drop it and it resizes everything. Now, one of the things you may be saying is, well, okay, how do I save that and work as usual? And it's just like any application. If you're creating a document in a word processor and you've written 10,000 more words and you click on save, you don't have to save it as a new file. All you can do here is you can click on here and you can click on save profile, and that will overwrite the previous version of this. And now it will show this information that is here. So now we've saved this profile and this is what we want to be able to see. Now, you can do this so many different ways that you want to be able to do this. One of the things that I actually like to be able to work on here is that sometimes, I just want a nice simple view of the map. So I can click on remove that, and now I've just got the map on the screen, which is one of the things that I love being able to do, which is there. And again, if I just click up here and I click on save, that saved the profile and everything's good. So now I've got my time distance with the information I'm looking for. Hold on a second. There we go. Finally came back again. Sometimes that happens. I think it's probably more my computer at that moment than anything else. We can now start analyzing this data. So that's how you set up and configure your view. And depending on how many channels you've got, what you want to see, you can create as many of these as you like. Now, one of the other things which is also useful is, you remember earlier I said, if you want to be able to log in with James and you want to create an AIM profile, check this out. I can actually pass that to one of my other PCs. And as long as I'm logged in with that username, I can access these on that particular list as well, which is useful. So these are some of the things associated with user profiles. And it's really important that we figure out what works for us in this particular view, because in many respects, some of us want busy screens, some of us want hardly anything on the screen at all. I'm one of those who just want some simple information. Now, the one thing that I truly do really, really like, and I'm sure many of you at Race Studio 2 Analysis have felt this, is when you load a track map and you've got to keep moving it around. Oh, it's here, I've got to move it over here so I can see the data over here. Well, the beauty of having this little track map here is that it helps you follow along in any of the data files that are here, and you can see any of that information. Now, that's useful, but here's where it gets really fun. If I were, for example, to open up a movie file, I'm going to get a default view again. This is my default view for the movie file. But at the same time, one of the things that I genuinely love about this particular view is that I can see 3 things on the page at a time. Now, you can have more than 3. There's actually 4 right now, but I don't want to see those. So I've created here, if I right click here and I click on load a profile, I've got down here, I'm a bit weird. I name everything with Ford 1600 as if I'm driving any other kind of vehicle in this sort of scenario, but maybe one day I might be. You can see that I've changed the view associated with the laptop that I have. So I see different and more varied information. And I can see the movies in an easier format. To put that into context, if I click on laps here and I go back and I pick a this one. Now you can see that my view is easier to be able to see as I've set it up so that I can see the movies next to each other rather than on top of each other, which is not how I liked it, because you get better real estate, because I'm also using this channels report. And I can also add a few other variables. Now, one of the things you may be noticing here is you're like, where's that time distance gone? If you've got 2 laps here, I want to be able to see time distance. Well, if I click up here and I want to be able to click time distance, I can click on show time compare. And again, these are things that you pick up over time. I'm not expecting everyone here to be able to go, well, hold on a second, I've got to do everything that's there. This is where you start playing around and configuring it, customizing it for you. But if I click on that, now it's going to bring in the time distance. This is coming from the SmartyCam, so the sampling is a little bit hit or miss, but you can see here, there are certain pieces of information that we want to be able to have a look at. And I'm like, okay, so what did I do differently here that, probably meant that I wasn't doing such a good job? So I can actually click here and it will show me where on track and what I was doing. Now I've probably picked 2 identical laps that are quite close to each other. So seeing the difference on the screen probably might not be as easy in terms of what's going on. But the reason I wanted to show you this is that as you start analyzing the data, you're going to have 3 key things available to you in your view. You're going to be able to see where it's happening and what's happening to the driver. So the time distance will show you what the driver is doing different. This one might be an interesting one. What did I do different coming out of here? Well, it could be this car. And remember, one of the things that we always try and remember when we're looking at our laps is we're like, did I have a perfectly clean lap as I'm going around the track? Or was there someone or something that may have presented itself in the way, which meant it was harder for me to be able to work? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to all watch all the things that happen at the same time. I want you to watch the little dot that shows me on the track map where I am. I want you to be able to watch what's happening with the video here. And I also want you to watch what's happening with the data here. I've asked you to watch the impossible. Not going to watch all of that. Hard to put, I haven't got enough eyeballs to be able to do that. But it's nice to be able to see what happens. And the video allows us to be able to see here that as I come through here, this might be the only pass I make in the entire session. So I've clearly picked this and planned it ahead of time to make it show that I'm all right at driving. You can see that based upon that car, look at where I'm positioned here versus positioned here. And look at where I am in relation to what might happen in terms of my ability to actually carry pretty good speed through there, which means I probably could have gone faster, actually taking a wide line into apex. But you can see that if I scroll back into a couple of spots, as I click in the graph, you can see that I'm at different points and there's different aspects of information down the straightaway, coming into this corner, which is called tower. And so it becomes a really useful way. Now, this is my personal profile view that I set up. You probably saw that I actually clicked and use it. This is one that I use when I'm at the track. This is one of mine that I love having. But at the same time, it demystifies so much of what happens on track. And it's one of those things that, we find ourselves oftentimes going, well, there might have been traffic there. Or, I might have had a slow car, whatever need be. And we might, I don't know about you, but I've actually told myself at time, oh yeah, there was totally traffic. Probably wasn't. I probably did a bad job. But at the same time, this helps take away some of this sort of mystery. But I can see every aspect where I am on the track, where I am actually in the video, and where I am on the data. And that's all created through the ability to be able to create your own customized views. And so that's the first thing I wanted to be able to show, or the second thing I should say. Now we've done the channel report and everything. But there are a few other things that I want to be able to talk about today. And with the last sort of 10, 15 minutes of the presentation, maybe with time for questions, I want to be able to address something that I get asked a lot. I get it asked on videos on YouTube. I get it asked when I'm at the track of people using this new software, which is, how do I make the most out of the track report, the splits, and the split time reports? And so we're going to have a look at that right now. Now, for the purposes of demonstration and the fact that I want my machine to have a little bit of processing power, and doing video takes a little bit more, I'm just going to look at a data file. And the reason I'm going to look at a data file is twofold. One, it might help my computer. Two, many of us may not have SmartyCams, which may change our sort of approach. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to close this down. And I'm going to go back to my dashboard of data that I have that's available to me here. Now, I was at Silverstone, well, no, not last weekend, the weekend before. It rained. which any of us who are in the UK will probably appreciate. I could have said that for every single weekend that's happened since last September. But at the same time, I have a lot of different files. And so I can click on here. And the only session that I did have where it wasn't raining was this qualifying session that I ran. So I'm just going to open up the data file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up. And it's going to show me the default view again. And you might be like, oh, going back to that default view, how annoying is that? Well, luckily enough, I happen to have a profile which I've got. I can load any of the ones that we're using. Let's just load the webinar test. And look at that, we're looking at a different track now, but we're still looking at the same view that we set up. So remember, the reason the profiles don't relate to the track, the profiles relate to what you want to be able to see. And if you're using the same car and the same channels and the same data setup, you can see the data for a different point in a different part of the track. Now, one of the things that's interesting that has happened is that I've got these bars across the top. And the reason I picked Silverstone National is that there aren't that many corners. And if many of you remember, so if I pick something like, I don't know, I did this with the Nürburgring with a friend of mine and his data once, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done and ever looked at. It's almost as if I needed one of those 49-inch wide monitors just to be able to make head nor tail of it. 168 corners or something like that. This is nice. This is far fewer corners for us to be able to work with. Anyway, sorry for that slight interlude. In many respects, we've got the data broken down by aim. Now, if you remember the way the software works from Race Studio 2 analysis, and we're going into Race Studio 3 analysis, green means straight, blue means right-hand turn, and red means left-hand turn, and it correlates with where things are on the track. So for example, this is the straightaway. I think they call it the National Straight, I think it is at Silverstone. This is Copse, and you can see where we are on track as we're going through. This is, I don't think there's a name for this straight. This is Maggots and Beckett's. And notice how this is sort of zooming into where I'm clicking. This is is this the National Straight? It's something like that. This would be effectively the complex, and then this is Woodcote coming out. And so the nice thing is it's sort of set up already a view for you to be able to analyze the data. Now, before I even get into customizing these for yourself, because the AIM device is recording GPS data, and because when you import your data into Race Studio 3 analysis with the GPS file, it's going to do this automatically for you. You don't have to go in and build a track map from a start. And that's something which is a huge plus for so many people, because oftentimes there was a lot of, where do I go and build a track map? How do I actually see a track map on screen? It's something that's done automatically and generated for you. And it will always default to straights, right hands, and left hands. Now you can customize that, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But even if we wanted to be able to see this information as it's set up now, we can enable the split times report. And it's one of the buttons that's across the top here. And if I hover over the top of it, it says show the split times report. Now, if many of you remember, if you haven't used this feature in Race Studio 2 analysis, you've been missing out, because it's one of those that is an actual confidence booster. It can really help you with a different type of analysis, which is, if I pieced all of these segments together perfectly, what would my actual lap time have been? Which is a nice way to be able to understand your theoretical best lap time. And so if I click here, it's going to open up a new tab. I'm just going to drag these over. They're a bit far over, but I want to be able to show what I'm talking about. Like that, a bit more. There we go. And what we're going to see is we're going to see all of these correlating. I'm going to go back to the, oh, I lost my mouse, there it is. I go back to the time distance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are all segments. If I go to the splits, it's broken them into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These are all the splits associated with that particular lap, which is great. And so now what I can see is I can see some information sort of associated with where I am and where we're going on track. Now, one of the key components that we have here is that we have a lot of control measures. Now, the reason I just hesitated is I just happened to have noticed that this data file isn't working perfectly with Race Studio 3 analysis. It would be the one data file that I picked. And if you're ever wondering, how do I know that? It means that it's not recording any lap times for the final sector that is here. These are all empty. So excuse the mild interlude while I go and load another one. I know it works well at Castle Coombe, so let's open that one up. And we're going to open up this right here. So at Castle Coombe, there's a lot more corners. Surprising for such a simple sort of circular track. But in essence, the same concept applies in terms of what we're looking at. So what I want to be able to do is I want to load that split times report that is here. And so all of those sectors that were correlating, you can see that it has worked because all of these sectors are set up. You can see that I'm able to see what my fastest time was through each of those areas. Now, one of the things that is also a nice new feature with the split times report is that if you click on any of the splits themselves, you can see more information about that. And so one of the things that I actually love is this one right at the top. Because if I click on, I don't know, let's click on sector number 2. You can see how well I did in relation to, this gives me an indication of a scatter plot of the lap times. But this is nice because one of the things you can see here is how good was I in relation to my speed through there. And if you remember from any of analysis, if you watched any analysis videos I've done, you've ever had anyone do any analysis at all, one of the things that shows inconsistency in data is when if you overlay 5 laps or 10 laps, if the laps are all far apart, there's inconsistency in the driver. If the laps are all very close together on a line, it means the driver is very consistent at that particular point. Usually on straightaways, there's a lot more consistency, which you can actually see here. They're a lot closer to each other. And so what you can do is you can click on any of these segments and start seeing what, look at that one. I mean, talk about having some areas to be able to improve there. There's a lot of stuff. And remember, this may be the one thing where you're like, okay, I want to be able to go in and start having a look at that sector number 4. I may want to go into my time distance where I've got the video to be able to see what was actually happening and see why was I inconsistent there and those sort of areas. Now, we're not necessarily going to do that for the purposes of time, but a lot of these analyses are basically signposts to be able to say, you need to fix your driving in that particular point. And so that's the first thing I'll say. There's this lovely sort of view here of all this data. You also get some extra views which are available to you. Now you can customize these with the user profile just like we did before. Do you remember I right-clicked it and you can add and remove the windows? Well, I'm going to leave this one here because you'll also notice that it's broken the map down into what the sectors are now. So you can see where you are and what that sector looks like around the lap, which is a fantastic feature in terms of being able to understand where exactly sector 1 starts, where sector 2 starts, and those sort of things. And so it's a wonderful view of being able to start figure out your overall sort of view time. Now, there's a few other things that I want to be able to point out here before we get into the customizing of your split times as well, which is what a lot of people are interested in too. Now, there's these buttons up here. Now, there's one button which I absolutely love, is this button here. If I click it, did I click it? I did. It colorizes your laps. So now if anyone's used to something like conditional formatting in Excel or just wants to be able to see something with a color code, this will start to show me very quickly visually where I was consistent and where I was inconsistent in terms of what was happening on a lap time. And so you can see that this one is a splattering of different colors all over the place. Green means you did the fastest through that particular sector. Red means you were slowest. And so you can see that, you know, maybe I was trying too hard. Maybe I was trying to warm up the tires. Maybe excuse after excuse after excuse. I'm sure that we've all got our lexicons of excuses that were happening. It wasn't very consistent here, and then slowly started to figure it out. But then got to the point where maybe I was sort of trying a little bit too hard. This was actually a race. So interestingly, this was potentially clearing traffic, and this was starting to get into a draft, and then this was battling with somebody else. And I actually know that this actually was happening, but we can go into the video if we need to and see that. But it allows you to visually see this sort of information is here. So this is a lovely view of the data itself. Now, the other thing you can also do is you can change some of these things as well. Now, this is the individual speed, individual seconds that you have through that particular area. So it's like saying sector 1 took 4.7 seconds, sector 2, 1.5. And I'm going to talk about how many sectors there are here in a minute, because there's too many, but we'll get to that. What we're going to do as well is we can click on this button and we can change this so we can see it in a cumulative approach, which starts to add them together. So if I scroll to the end of the lap, you can see that if you add all of these together, by the time you get to the end of the last sector, you can see what the lap time was. And so all of a sudden now we're looking at all of these different variables, all of these different lap times as they've come together. So you can see the genesis of the actual session as it went about, which is really interesting as to how that's working through the overall session. Now, some of the other things that people used to find so frustrating with split times report that has been fixed is that you used to have to go into lap manager and turn off your out lap and your in lap because those laps might have skewed your data. Well, you don't need to do that anymore. If you've got a funny old lap which is messing up your theoretical best lap time or your analysis, you can just turn it on and off here, which is an absolute fantastic feature that allows you to be able to see that. Plus, you also get all this additional information at the bottom here, which will allow you to be able to go in and start looking at what was my theoretical best lap time, which was a 1 minute 12.832. So my actual lap time was my theoretically best lap time, which never happens. And so, clearly that's as fast as the car will ever go. In many respects, this allows me to see some information. So there you go. So that's the split times report. Now, one of the things and the biggest critique of the way that the software breaks the stuff up, and the software can't do this any differently. So this is not a, hey, Emiliano, you should fix this type of scenario. This is something that just genuinely can't be fixed. Is if a system knows you're going right, you're going left, and you're going straight, that's how it auto-generates these segments. But the trick is that you can never, when you're on track, tell yourself, okay, on sector 7, I need to be doing this differently. And on sector 14, how do you even know where that is on track? So you want to be able to start creating your own views to make life easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the time distance. And we've got this view. This is the default view. We can leave it up if we want to, or just for the purposes of demonstration, we can add our webinar view back in and go back to our time distance. Now, what I might want to do here is I might want to make this something that I would like to be able to use for my own personal segments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll up here to the top and I'm going to ignore these. Now we're going to ignore this one completely today. This is still in development, but we're going to work on this one today because this is a really fun one to be able to use. And I'm going to click here and I'm going to click on something that says duplicate the split sequence. When it does that, it's going to say, okay, we want a new sequence. And I'm going to put in here a webinar test, which is cool. So now it's created. Now I've got a split sequence called AIM webinar test. Now you can see that it's changed that because it now says it up here. And we're in this. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start playing around. Now, if I'm over here and I want to merge these two together, let's say, for example, I want to make one big segment here. Well, I've got a lot of options, but the first thing I can do is I can right click on the number 1 and I can say merge with, and I'm going to say the next split. And it's created a bigger split. Now, if I wanted to merge together 1, 2, and 3, if I right click there and I say merge with both sides, got an even bigger split. And so now I can start creating easier and simpler splits to be able to create. And so to make life easier as we're going through this, I'm actually going to create 3 splits. So it almost feels like we need a slight interlude while I work through that, but I'm going to click on merge both sides. Merge both sides. I'll do it a few times and just get this. But you can do the previous split, the next split, but basically you have the option merge with both sides. 1, 2, 3. So click on this merge with both sides. So I've now got 3 segments that I've created. Now I have options now. Now I can start. Now you can do this as many as you like. Typically, if you were racing, let's say Formula 1, not that any of us are, but if you run somewhere like if we run Silverstone National at the Walder Hayes, we get a nice big book from TSL Timing that says sector 1, 2, 3. And that's as many sectors you're going to get. So you can say, well, where does sector 1, 2, and 3 start? Well, you can actually, this is something that, the start finishes in a different place, unfortunately, but you can do it with many tracks. It will tell you in feet where sector 1 starts and ends, and you can just pick that here. And you can say, that's where I want the split to be. And if you wanted to create a new split, you can right click on it up here and say, divide it. So if I clicked on divide, then create a new one. I don't want to do that, so I'm actually going to click on merge with the next split and just get rid of that again. Or I can start dragging and dropping. So one of the things you'll also notice is I can do this, and I can drag and drop that split that is there. And now I can customize this for me to what I want to be able to use. And so let's have a look at this and see if we can figure it out. Now, rules of splits to make life easier, and I'm not going to get into too much detail here, but you never want your split to be when you're mid-corner, when you're braking, Ideally, you want it in an area where you're running straight and level, because that way you take any of the variables that exist that could be subject to inconsistency, and it allows you to have a truer representation of what's happening. So let's do this. Let's split sector 1 right here, just before we start breaking at this point. If you wonder where that is, if I click here, that's running through COPS, coming up into maggots and beckets there, which is nice. So we're going to say that's the first one. The next one we probably want to have as we come down the end of, if I click here, oh no, beg your pardon, we're not Silverstone National, sorry. You're like, where is he? This is as you're coming up to the front. So this is coming down the straightaway. This is Avon Rise as you're coming into Quarry. You know, that's one of the big learnings of being back in the UK after being in the US, is that in the US, all corners have numbers, whereas so many of our UK tracks are named. And so it's trying to remember the names of the corners as well. So that's sector 1. Sector 2, we want to have, let's say, for example, just before we're coming into, in this instance, this would be as the little dot. Oh, I lost my mouse. Let's do this. As the little dot appears here, which would be coming into tower. So I'm like, okay, I'm fine with that. And then sector 3 can be the rest. Now, one of the things that you have as an option to be able to configure as well is how you want them to show up. This is blue, green, blue. And if I right click on that, if I want it to be red, I can say I would like that to be corner 1. If I want that to be green, I can say that's a straight. Now, usually this is designed to be able to set this up based upon whether it's a straight left or right-hand corner, but you can also set it up for easy configuration when you get into the split times report. So right now I'm just going to leave it at 1, 2, and 3. Now, there's one other thing you can use. Remember earlier I said I actually sent a piece of feedback into AIM from the device. You can also name these. So if you know what that corner is, you can rename it and say, this one happens to be Quarry. Whoops. Or can't spell. I'll leave it at that for now. And you can name it in the segment as well. Now, and Emiliano, I know you're on the call. When you reload the user profile, it takes the name away and just takes it back to number 1. But over time, and this is when I'm showing you all this right now, is that this is a fantastic feature, because when you're comparing data in the split times report, you will also get that information as well as it's there. Now what I can do is I can click up here, I can go back to the split times report, which is here. Oops, wrong one. And notice now we just have those 3 segments that we've created. And we have a lot more ways of being able to analyze that data and understand what the actual performance was in each of those particular segments around the track. And so it just makes analysis so much easier to be able to work through and understand what's happening. And so it's a really nice way of being able to do this. Now, one of the things that you may also want to do is to save that split. So you can click here and you can put, export the sequence that you just created. And for example, I've actually got this one with, I can export any of these. But you just pick on the one and you export it to a folder, and then it's ready for you to be able to import if you want to use it at a later date. And so you'll never lose these. Just to show you, I might want to import a split sequence. If I click on there, I might want to click on this one, Castle Combe. I've probably already set that up, so let's ignore that for now. But basically, I have the option of being able to create a new view that's here as well, in terms of remembering that split sequence and bringing it back. And so I know we're coming up on time, but these were the 4 things that we wanted to be able to discuss today as part of this conversation. It was a quick recap. It was looking at the channels report, customizing your profile, and being able to work with the split times report. And that was what we wanted to cover today. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop and see if we've got some chat-based questions, or some maybe even somebody wants to go live with questions, and be able to see if we want to be able to answer those. So hopefully this was useful. There we go. So any questions? Any questions in the chat? I don't know if James or anyone had seen. Let's have a look here, see if there's anything. Lots of questions being answered, which is brilliant as we go through.
Can I ask a question, please, James?
Of course you can, mate.
It was going back to RS Race Studio 2. I've only just downloaded RS3 and the beta. So, but when I used to open up the most recent run, it would sometimes the color of the trace would be in red, sometimes the color of the trace would be in blue, and there was never any consistency of what color it was going to be. So for example, I'm trying to compare two laps, perhaps with two different drivers. I want the fastest lap to be the faster than two drivers to be in red. I would specifically I'll open that one first. And sometimes it'd be red, sometimes it'd be blue, and it would just choose its own color irrespective. I wonder if that's fixed in Race Studio 3.
Well, I'm going to show you in both, but I've got Race Studio 2 analysis open here. Hopefully you can see it.
Yeah.
Which is good. So I'm going to pick, what was I doing? Let's do one where that's same track, two different sessions. So here we go. Two races here, right?
Yep.
But I open these up. This is Race Studio 2. This is consistent in Race Studio 2 analysis or Race Studio 3 analysis.
Right.
Hold on a second. Anyone remember? So user profiles apply on Race Studio 2 analysis as well. Anyone who's interested, I'm just going to click on my 2021 view. So this is the view that I have as I create if I'm using Race Studio 2 analysis.
Right.
I tried to mimic what they were doing on the Formula One screen and did a poor job of it. So I'm going to go back to that. Now, one of the things that you mentioned is I can't control that. Well, you can. If you click on this button, measures, and you click in any of these, if the fastest lap is red right now and you want that to be, I don't know.
Sorry, Jakes, can I just confirm? I get that and I do that, but I have to do that almost every single time. What I want to be able to do is open one, but the first one I open to be red and the second one I open to be blue, and then I don't have to keep going for it every time. Do you see what I mean? I don't have to keep changing.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I think.
You see what I mean?
Got it. Yeah.
And it's really frustrating that every single time I open, I go for the first one. I'll think, well, the first one I open will be red. Great. I'll open that first. And I open it. And of course, it opens up as blue. And I'm like, right, I have to change them all again. I have to change those colors in that little box. That's what I'm talking about. Thanks, James.
Got it. No problem. That makes sense. So I'm glad we got there. So we know what we're talking about. Emiliano's on the call. When we do Race Studio 3 analysis, I always get the first one that I open is always burgundy red. Right. And that's always been the case. Emiliano, do you have any thoughts on that? Because obviously you're designing what color opens up every time you open it up to start with in terms of color of laps.
At the moment, I should have set the colors to be on the first ordered by which is the first lap you select, and then which is the second, and then which is the third. It's not sorted. The colors are not selected according to which is the fastest lap. That for sure. But it's only a matter on which is the lap you select as first and as the second and so on. So to tell you the truth, I do not know if it's the case to make colors according to how fast the lap has been. Maybe it's an idea. I don't know.
No, but sorry, Emiliano, you're almost there. But what I'm saying is, all I want is the first run I open, the first lap I open, for that to always be a consistent color, whether it's the fastest or slowest, whichever I open first. If that's red, great. And then the second one is blue. But at the moment, it changes every time I go into Race Studio. It chooses a different color for me.
It should behave like this. It should. I will go checking for sure.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
That's great.
Excellent. Well, that's that. I mean, as I said, I always get burgundy red the first one I open, so maybe that's doing what we wanted to do. So, Roger, I think it's well worth giving it a try. Based on getting into it.
Sorry, can I just jump in? Have you saved the colours in your user profile? So, for example, we were just talking about setting a profile up. Have you gone into the colours and saved that as a user profile, and then you load up in that user profile?
No, that's exactly what happened. When I've got all my user profiles, that works really. I'm dead pleased with your user profiles, but I mean, certainly every time I open up, I'll go and download a lot of data from 2 or 3 cars, and I'll say, right, okay, now which was the quickest? So I get to my test database, which is the quickest? Right, I'll open that because I want that to be the first one I see. One time it'll be red, the next time it'll be blue, the next time it'll be red, the next time it'll be blue. There's never consistency, irrespective of what user profile I'm on.
So once you've got that open, if you, for example, in Race Studio 2 analysis, if you hit, say, for example, user profiles control 1, control 2, if you hit control 1, that should take you through and make all of your colors the same.
That's right. I mean, certainly I can, as James, our host, sort of did at the very start of, when he was answering my initial question, he changed the color of the book. I can absolutely change that, but I just want the first ones that I open to be red or to be blue. I don't care which it is, as long as it's consistent forever. That's all I want.
Got it.
And I don't think it is at the moment. That's my point. I certainly it isn't, neither for myself nor for James Scott, who's the major tech at Radical Sports Cars. We both get the same issue.
That's good feedback. I think that best to see if what happens in Race Studio 3 analysis, and then that could be just something to send through on AIM feedback as well. But that makes a lot of sense in terms of always make the first one you open red, and the second one you always open blue.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, cool. Other questions and thoughts? I know we're just slightly over time for everyone. I want to be respectful of the hour, but happy to continue for a few more questions if they're there. Otherwise, we'll end this session and pick up again another time. I saw there was a ton of backwards and forwards on the chat, but lots of questions been answered. Brilliant. All right. So thanks everyone for being here today, and we will. I believe a follow-up email will happen afterwards to all those who sort of attended, and hopefully we'll have the recording up. But next time around, it'd be interesting if anyone wants to email in what they'd like to see next time, whether we want to go over something again, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I think the next time around, we'll start looking at some of the other features that we didn't cover today. All right, cool.
One last quick one, if I may, just before we close. It's not exactly a matter of questions, rather than a few things that it looks like are not working on my program. Is it possible that I share my screen with you or not?
I think probably, Emiliano, I mean, I think that's best for you to be able to have feedback. I don't know if everyone wants to be able to stay for that. I think that that's an option, but if you can share from this, I think that's fine.
Okay.
So we've got a request for math channels next time. Absolutely. I think that's something that Emiliano is probably working feverishly on being able to address now. I've been working a little bit with some of the math channels as they set up, and interestingly, some of the ones we used to have to create manually are now defaults for GPS, which means everyone can use them. So we can cover off on some of those, which I think will be a really good sort of conversation.
Yeah, math channels are being developed in these days. They are already available in our pre-beta version, and we have a developer version in which they are already available. So very likely next beta will have some news on that.
Cool, that's great. Just out of curiosity, are you still sharing your screen?
Me, I cannot share because it's disabled by the host.
Oh, okay. So my recommendation there, and I don't know if you want to sort of connect with Emiliano, if you want to be able to share something there. I'm sure that's great if you just want to sort of share your...
Yeah, sure. I just want to give some feedback on some things that look to not be working. Like, for example, where you can load the profile, I only have an option to clear the profile. And I do not get the option to load the profile. Or on the time distance tab in the beginning, I do not have at all the colored segments on the top. Whereas when I go to generate the split times report, I do have it normally.
Okay, for not being able to load the profile, I think the software does this when you do not have any profile saved, I think. And as for the the time distance and not having the markers at the top, I think you are in time mode. They are available only in distance mode. Try to look into one of the icons on the right top part of the time distance. You should be able to identify one icon that switches from time to distance mode. Maybe James can help us and can show it for you.
Yeah, sure. Hold on. I'm looking at my screen going, I can see that. Hold on a second.
Yeah, I think it's the first button from the second array of switches from the top. But even when I change this, nope. Even if when it goes from distance to time or vice versa, it remains the same. I still do not have the color like we can see now on the screen, Roger.
But
So
you have colors in the split report.
Yeah, on the split report, I can normally see them. Although for some reason, again, the best theoretical does not exactly work like shown previously.
My guess now is that it can depend on data. Is it possible for you to share with us a session file so I can double check here what happens?
Yes, sure.
That's a good idea. And I think so. One of the things I will say, because I'm sure some folks want to sort of do you want to share email addresses in the chat box?
Okay, yeah, sure.
And then we'll bring this one to a close.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, guys. Very helpful.
You're welcome.
Brilliant. So software@aim-sportline.com. Brilliant. All right, great. So until this time next month, where we'll cover other things, we've got one request already in for math channels, but anything else, feel free to give us a shout and we'll address it there. So thanks everyone for attending.
You're welcome.